here with Leslie from ATRI, who's given us invaluable information again this year, the operational cost of trucking. Thanks, Alex, for sharing it with us.
My pleasure, Doug. Always great talking with you. Yeah, so as you know, and a lot of your listeners surely know, our operational costs of trucking report is one of the biggest ones we do each year, and it's a benchmarking report for motor carriers to understand their costs and how their peers measure up. But it's also a barometer, really, of the trucking industry and an indicator of what the trends look like in the industry and how those are playing out. So it's something we've been doing since 2008, almost 2 decades now.
Wow.
And we calculate those line item costs and key performance measures and revenue benchmarks by mile, by hour, by sector, by fleet size. So really, it's really well tooled, to produce insights regardless of who you are in the trucking industry. Unfortunately, this has been a really challenging market, and certainly it's been challenging on the cost front as well for the trucking industry. So, the sort of broad level factors we found were that, a lot of line item costs were decreasing or at least increasing below inflation, which is good, but, a couple of these key ones like truck trailer payments continued to rise. And at the same time,
truck insurance again as well, right?
Say that again. Sorry, Doug.
And truck insurance again as well.
Yes. Yeah. Insurance was one of those that continued to climb. Yeah. And at the same time, operations, we saw a lot of those key performance measures reflect cost cutting efforts to try to work around that. But at the same time, without improvement in rates, those profit margins were just razor thin this year. So we can see that play out here in this next slide, which shows the per mile cost for each of those areas. So you can see that at the very bottom right of that screen there, $2.26 was the overall total per mile to operate a truck in 2024. That's down slightly from 2023, but that's just because of fuel, really. You can see that top line is fuel costs. And the price of diesel had skyrocketed in 2022 with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and in 2023 it was coming down, but still elevated. So that really is what underwrote cost savings overall. If you look at this next slide, shows the percentage change for each of those line items, and you can see fuel costs again dropped by 13%. But when we start going down the line, you can see that a lot of those still went up. Truck and trailer payments by 8.3%. Repair and maintenance actually went down by 2%. That was a key area of relief for the industry this year. But like you pointed out, Doug, truck insurance went up by about 3%. Tires were up a little bit. Tolls were up. That percentage always looks big because it's such a small number. So that's a little bit of a distraction. But driver wages only by 2.4%. And then driver benefits by about 4.8%. So that was a really interesting factor with driver wages. As you recall, right, when we had those immediate after pandemic years, driver wages were going up by incredible rates. You can see here that 15.5 in 2022. But it's gradually come down since then, 7.6 in 23 and now 2.4%. So that market is begun to adjust on the driver wage front. Unfortunately for fleets, it was offset by driver benefits costs going up this year. Here's a little bit more detailed look at what we saw in truck and trailer payments. Again, the largest rise this year of all the line items. So one of the big factors is that rising prices on new trucks are really creating a disparity between costs for the larger fleets. Usually they're buying all new trucks, all those new Class 8 sleepers, versus the smaller fleets, which tend to purchase a bit more of their assets used or use perhaps the leasing arrangement. So you can see in this chart here that breaks down truckload and specialized by fleet size. You can see the huge gaps between some of those larger sized fleets in truckload, for example, over 50 cents a mile for fleets in that 250 to 1,000 truck group, compared with trucks, only in, 5 to 25 truck fleets at about 32 cents, right? So that's almost a 20-cent gap. And that's really something we're seeing as equipment prices are on the rise. R&M costs, like I mentioned, were one of the few areas where we actually saw prices come down, which was extremely beneficial to fleets. And it was especially beneficial too to fleets that are maybe buying used and doing more repair maintenance. They were able to experience more of those savings. But one thing that we do see is that mileage between breakdowns has a fairly strong relationship with repair and maintenance costs, which is to say that, again, preventative maintenance, it saves you on cost and it also saves you on those operations. You spend less time pulling the truck off the road, waiting for repair to take place.
Any thought that the economy, Alex, was a factor in the reduced maintenance? Because we saw that in '08, is when people tried to cut back, that was where they seemed to compromise.
It's a great point, Doug. So that is one possibility, certainly. But what we have seen is twofold. On the parts side, you got to remember that after that pandemic happened, parts costs were so elevated for those first few years because you just couldn't get them very well. So part of that decrease in costs this year reflects that the parts market has normalized a bit more.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Another dimension is that just as for truck driver wages have not gone up nearly as much, we saw the same thing with technician labor, where that actually remained relatively flat or a little bit up, a little down. And so a couple factors there really did help as well, keeping those repair and maintenance costs down.
And glad to hear that, as opposed to we just did less. So
right. Yeah. And one other factor really too is that you can see on this truck and trailer slide, the average truck age came down a little bit more this year, actually, to 3.4 years on average. When you've got fleets running newer trucks on average, whether that's brand new or whether it's used trucks that simply aren't as old, that helps reduce your repair and maintenance costs too. Insurance costs, again, up by 3% in 2024. Your initial reaction might be, someone listening might be, 3% isn't terrible. Inflation was at 2.9%, so it's only a little over inflation. But the thing to keep in mind is that 3% up in 24 means that that huge 12.5% increase we saw in 2023 has been solidified. It's been solidified into that market. Gotcha. And so that is really, keeping that longer perspective is what makes this a particularly challenging increase. The recent history on this really is important. The pandemic happened in 2020. We had a year there where insurance rates were stabilized, and actually 2 years where they remained stabilized, because with all those extra four-wheelers off the highways during 2020, there were fewer crashes. And the commercial auto segment was profitable for the first time in a decade. So that really underwrote a couple years there where we had cost relief in insurance, even while all these other cost centers were skyrocketing. But as we all know now, in 2023, that all caught up with us. And we saw that huge jump that essentially brought us right back to the standard trajectory. And then again, that 3% increase in 2024 means that we have solidified, that has become an entrenched increase. And again, over the past 8 years, that's an increase of 36%. So a wow. a huge increase, again, as the commercial auto segment continues to struggle to remain profitable. One data point we also collect here, Doug, is out-of-pocket costs, which is really important because when it comes to your cost of risk as a fleet, insurance premiums get the biggest attention, of course, but there's all kinds of other ways that you pay for risk, right? The insurance cost is the risk that you've offset or offboarded to the insurer, but you also retain a lot of your own risk in terms of whatever you're paying, up to that deductible level, or whatever you're paying in excess, or if you have a self-insurance or something like that. So those out-of-pocket costs, it's really important to see those as part of the balance with insurance premiums.
In my argument or my presentation is that is where companies can control and put the money back on the bottom line, going back to ATRI's study on insurance a few years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which, as you know, we're going to be updating that insurance research as well. So that'll be great. And of course, as you point out really well in your presentations, Doug, total cost of risk includes all these other investments in safety and in driver retention and all these other things as well. But the ones that are easiest for us, at least, to really put a dollar amount on are these two. And one of the things that we saw in 2024 was that actually, the larger fleets didn't quite have this down, really. Ideally, right, a larger fleet is paying less in insurance, but they should also be paying a bit less in out-of-pocket costs, or rather, they should be paying less in their combined premiums and out-of-pocket costs, right? Larger fleets should be enjoying that economy of scale. But what we saw in 2024 was actually that those fleets with 250 to 1,000 and 1,000 or more trucks in the truckload sector actually didn't quite have their premium to out-of-pocket ratios balanced right. So they were actually paying more out of pocket, which meant that their savings on insurance were being offset. So this is one key area where, again, those larger truckload fleets really want to sit down and look at, okay, how can we improve our cost efficiency when it comes to total cost of risk?
I'd be interested to see the new study because I think the last one said that the companies that had their retention seemed to have a lower total cost of risk based upon the conscientiousness on that. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And again, this is money to be saved here, right? If you compare that 100 to 250 truck group to that 1,000+ truck group, it's a 3 cent per mile difference. I mean, that's huge when that adds up.
Absolutely.
We track a lot of operational, key performance metrics in this report as well. And really this year, they gave us a picture of an industry that is, again, really struggling in a long-term freight recession and trying to do whatever they can to really make ends meet. So on the mileage side, the way we saw this was after a 10-year trend, really, of fleets running fewer miles per truck per year. We saw that mileage, that odometer metric, tick up again a little bit to about 82,600 miles or so. And at the same time, we saw deadhead mileage tick up a little bit as well, about half a percentage point to 16.7%. What that tells me is that we've got fleets that they're driving farther and they're taking on more non-revenue miles in order to get freight that is actually financially viable for them. So again, it's an operational challenge. What these two figures tell me is that our supply chain right now is less efficient as a result of the need to be able to get freight that actually pays.
Yeah.
And then we can also see how fleets are trimming their operations as well to try to produce savings. Again, when costs are going up everywhere, you're trying to pinch those pennies, you're trying to run those miles, but there's just so little give right now. We saw fleets in 2024 decrease their fleet size or reduce capacity by 2.2%. And again, this is actually in 2023, this outlook was very different. I think a lot of fleets were still in the mindset of we're going to have a recession for a year and a half or something like that, but then it'll turn and we want to be ready, right? So in 2023, we saw that fleets were still actually increasing their capacity. That's turned this year. This year, I think that the mindset has shifted, that this might be the longer term recession that we feared. We also saw, driver per truck ratio. That means more trucks are being parked. So they're not only reducing fleet size, but they're leaving more trucks parked. And then they're reducing their back office staff by almost 7%, which is,
Wow.
again, pretty significant.
Yeah.
Here's again to show you just how this mindset has changed. So 2022, remember the first half of that year was still gangbusters. The second half was when the freight recession began. Those rates began to fall. So you can see that middle orange kind of creamsicle colored band, or for anyone who's colorblind, the middle band there shows operating margins. So tankers were making an average of 11% profit, refrigerated 6%, truckload dry van 8%, flatbed 7%. 2022 was a good year. It wasn't the gangbusters year of 2021, but those are still solid margins. Now, let's compare those to 2024. Tankers were making 1.9% margins, refrigerated 0.1%, flatbed 0.4%, and truckload actually, again, for our respondents, was actually an average loss of 2.3%. That's the market that we're in right now. Again, even though you might look at that initial slide that I had and say, well, costs only went up by slightly more than inflation. Normally, we might say that's pretty good, but with no leeway on rates, any increase in costs is punishing.
Yeah.
I have just one last slide here, and that is the first quarter trends for 2025. And as you can see, insurance premiums are actually at the top of that list, 5.8% change. For premiums, this is often right. You see a lot of fleets, they'll negotiate their premiums for the year, right? Their policy for the year. And so that number might be locked in for the year. We might not see it go too much different from that by the end of the year. But again, 5.8% is high, regardless. It's higher than what it was for the year in 2024, certainly. So that's really one of the key areas that we're watching. Truck and trailer payments still high. Driver benefits, again, still high as well. So unfortunately, on the cost side of things, it's looking like the trends are continuing basically into 2025.
One of the things that struck me in the report, Alex, was on the driver benefits, that there's now parking payments as a benefit in there. One of the top issues for drivers as well is, I think, number 2 on the ATRI top 10 list the last time. Becoming more prevalent that you see, Alex?
Truck parking is, so I should say first that we do not include it in this core benefit cost line item, but we do track it. We kind of track it like we would track a bonus, basically, in this report. We haven't seen the offering of truck parking compensation increase or decrease either, really, in the last couple of years. One of the tricky things about tracking truck parking is that so many different fleets do it different ways. Some will compensate it specifically or reimburse it specifically, but some pay per diem bonuses, basically, and that's considered part of the per diem. Or you have some fleets that essentially say, we're going to pay you more per mile under the assumption that you're paying for parking out of it. We don't want to mess around with, will you get it, won't you get it, whatever, just do it up front. So that is a number that is kind of hard to pin down in a way, just because it is kind of part of a company's culture and of course their operations too. But like you say, certainly an area that is getting more and more attention from the fleet side. It's always gotten attention from the driver side, but motor carriers are really beginning to put more attention into that as well as a retention strategy.
Sounds great. Alex, thank you as always.
My pleasure as always, Doug.
For taking the time today, but primarily as well for putting this together. Invaluable, and it's incredible for not just the companies to benchmark themselves, but for the rest of us in the industry to look at and see where the indicators are. We greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I'll just say in closing, the full report, as with all ATRI's work, is available for free at truckingresearch.org. If you're a fleet listening to this and you haven't participated before, we really encourage you to do so. All participating fleets get a customized report that directly compares your metrics to your peer group, the same sector and size. So it's a huge value to participants. And if you're someone who works with fleets, we encourage you to encourage them to participate as well, just because, again, it is such a valuable resource for industry partners as well.
And again, as Rebecca says, the website is what we do, truckingresearch.org. So
that is right.
thanks, Alex.
Thanks.